All right, so you're with us again for another deep dive. And tonight, we're going to kind of put aside those typical ways folks try to get a glimpse into what's coming, like
Yeah.
astrology or numerology.
Crystal balls.
Yeah, none of that. None of that tonight. No crystal balls or anything.
Right.
We're going right into this fascinating lecture by Neville Goddard from April 4th, 1966,
Right.
all about understanding your future.
And you know what's really interesting about Goddard's perspective on this is he doesn't really, look outward for clues about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
He turns to the Bible,
Yeah.
but with a very particular lens.
Okay.
And he actually argues that when it comes to your everyday world, the kind of day-to-day experiences,
Right.
he calls this the world of Caesar, that your future isn't set in stone.
Yeah, that's a huge point right there. That's a key takeaway right at the beginning is that, the Bible, as Goddard interprets it, doesn't mean that you're locked into some predetermined future here on Earth. He actually talks about two futures.
Right.
One is this ultimate unconditional awakening as God, which he calls grace.
Yeah.
But for our conversation tonight, we're zeroing in on the other one,
Right.
the conditioned future that we all experience day to day,
Right.
and how you actively play a role in shaping it.
Yes, and if we tie this to a really fundamental piece of scripture, Matthew 21:22, it kind of sets the stage perfectly.
Okay.
It says, quote, "Whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith." Now, what jumps out at you about that in terms of, shaping our future?
Well, the word whatever just really stands out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Goddard really emphasizes that it means anything. It doesn't come with a list of, acceptable or good requests.
Right.
That's a pretty bold idea.
It is, yeah.
So let's dig into this a little bit more. How Goddard expands on this whole idea of us having this inherent power to influence what's going to happen.
Yeah, a key piece of Goddard's teaching is his redefinition of prophecy. He actually quotes William Blake, who said that, quote, "Every honest man is a prophet." Now, this isn't about predicting some future event that's way out there.
Right.
It's about understanding that there's a direct link between your state of mind right now, like your dominant thoughts and feelings, and what actually happens in your life.
So it's almost like you're saying that the outside world is like a reflection of what's going on inside your mind.
Yes, like a printout
Yeah.
of your inner thoughts.
Okay.
You are the printer.
So you're the one who's actually creating that reality in a sense.
Exactly.
He really pushes back against, those mediums who claim to see a fixed future for you regardless of what you're thinking or feeling at the moment.
Yeah, he calls that a lie.
He does.
He says your future is in your hands.
Straight us.
It's a direct outcome of your current state of consciousness.
Yeah.
Change that inner state,
Yeah.
and you change your external world.
So when he talks about this, state of consciousness, what does he really mean?
Well, he's essentially referring to, the thoughts, the feelings, and the assumptions you have about yourself and the world.
Okay.
The ones that kind of dominate your mind.
Right.
And this leads to this really powerful concept of the world as an infinite response.
Okay.
Think about it this way. Everything around you is kind of like a mirror,
Okay.
reflecting back your inner landscape.
That's interesting.
You are what he calls the operant power,
Okay.
the one initiating the changes.
So we're not just passive recipients of whatever's coming at us.
Exactly.
We're actually actively participating in creating it.
That's right.
He even brings in this verse from 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us.
Right.
And his interpretation here is crucial. He clarifies that he isn't some distant deity, but rather the divine within us. What he calls man's own wonderful human imagination.
Yes. That's such a beautiful phrase.
So what does this all mean for someone listening?
Well, it means that to change your circumstances, you've got to take control internally. You choose what you desire.
Yeah.
You fully embody that feeling of already having it.
Like it's real right now.
Yeah, and you become totally convinced of its reality, even if your current situation says otherwise.
Even if it looks totally different in the outside world.
Right. Goddard says that the world has no choice but to align with that inner conviction.
So it's about really believing it with every fiber of your being.
Yes, exactly.
And Goddard actually shares some really remarkable stories about how people applied these principles in their own lives.
Right.
The first one involves a minister named Danny and his wife.
Yes.
What's so fascinating about their experience?
Well, what's really insightful about Danny's wife's approach was how she used her imagination.
Okay.
She would create this mental scene over and over again,
Okay.
where she'd hear herself saying to Danny, quote, Danny, I am so happy that you have sold your song and have your 100,000 a year plus income.
Wow. So she was very specific.
Very specific.
Yeah.
And she practiced this until it felt completely natural and real to her.
Okay. And what happened in their actual lives is pretty incredible.
It is, yeah.
So this highly successful commercial artist named Gloria Wood,
Right.
who had 9 gold records.
Yes, very successful.
Yeah, stepped in and offered to help Danny with his music.
Right, and their album was released by Gloria Wood's promotion company.
Wow.
And having her name attached to his meant instant sales.
Yeah, that's a huge boost right there.
Absolutely.
So even though that $100,000 income was just starting to materialize, you can see how that initial act of imagination set a powerful chain of events in motion.
Yes, it's a great example of how that inner conviction can start to shape outer circumstances.
And it's worth mentioning that Danny wasn't some, big-time musician.
Right.
He was a one-man act and a minister.
Which makes it even more remarkable.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
really speaks to the potential within each of us to create change.
Absolutely. The next story features a pretty well-known person, Mrs. Archibald Roosevelt,
Oh, wow.
the daughter-in-law of Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, wow.
So what was she struggling with?
Well, Mrs. Roosevelt, she needed the income from her townhome in New York City
Okay.
to be able to open up her summer home in Long Island.
Right.
But for the first time in over 20 years, she hadn't gotten a single offer to rent her apartment.
And even with the same real estate agent.
The same agent, yeah, and even with all her social connections.
So this wasn't just about, wanting a vacation home.
Right.
Goddard points out that they weren't the wealthy Roosevelts.
Right.
And she had real financial limitations.
Including obligations, tied to their family name.
So it was a legitimate predicament.
It was.
What did Goddard tell her to do?
He told her to use her imagination
Okay.
to really experience sleeping in her Long Island home that very night.
Wow.
To really immerse herself in that feeling of being there.
Okay.
And to picture her Manhattan apartment from across the East River.
So he was having her create that reality in her mind before it actually happened.
Yes, that's right.
So that night, she went to bed and, in her imagination, transported herself to her Long Island home. And she mentally went through the motions of being there.
And get this, the very next day, the agent called.
Oh, wow.
With news that someone wanted to rent the apartment immediately and pay in advance.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's incredible to think that just shifting your mental focus could lead to such tangible results.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much of our reality is shaped by our inner world without us even being aware of it.
Exactly.
So she got to move into her Long Island home.
She did.
And Goddard wasn't surprised at all, was he?
Not one bit.
What did he say?
He said if she followed his instructions exactly, it had to happen.
He was that confident.
Absolutely.
It really reinforces his idea of what prayer is.
Yes.
It's not just words. It's
Right.
this movement towards embracing being near or at the desired state,
Yes.
all through your imagination.
That's right.
It's not passive, it's active.
It is, yeah.
These stories really highlight his point,
Yeah.
that your future isn't in the stars or in tea leaves or in anything outside of your own state of consciousness.
He even uses Hebrews 11:3.
Yeah.
By faith, we understand that the universe was created by God's word, so that what can be seen was made out of what cannot be seen.
Powerful verse.
Yeah, connecting that to Mrs. Roosevelt's experience, where nothing outwardly changed until the manifestation happened.
In that instruction from Matthew 6:6 about going into your room, closing the door, and praying to your Father who is unseen,
Yeah.
takes on a whole new meaning in this context. It's
That's
about
amazing.
focusing your imagination on what you want,
Mm.
shutting out all the distractions of what's happening right now.
Yeah, tuning out the external world and tuning into your inner world.
Exactly.
But Goddard also talks about the importance of using this power responsibly.
Right. He calls imagination a double-edged sword,
Yeah, he does.
emphasizing that it should be used lovingly for the benefit of others.
Mm.
And he cautions against using it with hate
Yeah.
because, quote, there is no other, it's yourself pushed out.
So any negativity you send out is ultimately coming back to you. Yes, because we're all interconnected.
He even tells that story about Mike Quinn,
Right.
the head of the transport union,
Mm-hmm.
who wished harm on a judge, and then shortly after he had a heart attack.
Yeah, it's a powerful example of this principle of no other.
Yeah, you can't harm someone else without harming yourself.
It goes back to that idea of interconnectedness.
So what's the takeaway for us?
Well, it leads us to this ethical guideline. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah, the golden rule.
The golden rule, exactly. And Goddard calls this the eternal code
Hmm.
for shaping your future.
and for using this power constructively.
Right.
So where does faith fit into all of this?
Right. Well, Goddard's definition of faith is really practical.
Okay.
He says it's a, quote, simple surrender of self to the Spirit of God.
So it's not about blindly believing in something?
No, it's about identifying with your desired state, surrendering your consciousness to it,
Okay.
as if you're already living it.
So like really feeling it in your bones.
Exactly. And the world responds to that state of being.
Wow.
It's almost like acting.
Okay.
If you want to feel confident, you start acting confident.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your posture changes, your voice gets stronger.
Right.
Goddard says to do the same with your desires and your imagination.
Okay.
Keep acting as if they're already real until they feel completely natural to you.
So it's not about waiting for the outside world to change. It's about changing your inner world first.
Exactly.
And he challenges the idea that external forces control our lives.
Right.
He quotes Cassius from Julius Caesar. "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings."
We have the power within us.
And he tells a story about a woman named Norma who used astrology.
Right.
She misread a chart, but still manifested $100.
Yeah, because she was so convinced she was going to get it.
Right. So it wasn't the accuracy of the astrology that mattered. It was her belief.
It was her belief and the imaginative conviction that came with it.
Yeah. So it really undermines the idea that we need to rely on external tools to predict our future.
It does.
He even talks about Hitler's fascination with astrology and asks, where did that get him?
Powerful question.
Yeah, reinforcing that true power comes from within.
And for Goddard, God is synonymous with your own wonderful human imagination.
Yeah.
Imagining is God in action,
Wow.
the sole creator and receiver of your reality.
Okay, towards the end of the lecture, there's a Q and a 4 where someone asks a really practical question about moving to a new house.
Right.
What was their question?
The listener said they'd been mentally living in their dream house, but it felt like things weren't really moving forward.
Okay.
They wondered if they should start taking physical steps, like packing.
Right, to kind of push things along.
Exactly.
So what did Goddard say?
He said very clearly that you don't need to try to help God.
Okay.
The most important thing is to consistently dwell in the desired state.
So in their mind, they're already living in that new house.
Yes, exactly.
He even shares a story about himself.
Right.
Where he casually imagined being in Barbados during a snowy New York winter. And later on, it actually happened.
Right. He had to go there for family reasons.
So even a fleeting thought can manifest.
It can, but it also reminds us to be mindful of what we focus on.
Yeah, what we dwell on in our minds.
Because it can have real-world consequences.
Absolutely. So to wrap this all up,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway from this deep dive into Neville Goddard's lecture?
The key message is that your future in this world of Caesar isn't fixed by fate or circumstance.
Okay.
It's shaped by your inner world, your imagination, and your state of consciousness.
Wow.
You are the operant power in your life.
So it's about taking responsibility for our inner world.
Yes.
And recognizing that it has a direct impact on our outer world.
Absolutely.
It really changes how you see things, doesn't it?
It does.
Those events that might seem random or like fate could actually be influenced by our thoughts and feelings.
It's a powerful concept to consider.
It makes you wonder.
Yeah.
How does this new understanding change the way you view your life and your ability to shape it?
What future will you choose to imagine and inhabit now that you know this?
It's a really empowering idea.
It is, yeah.
That we have this capacity to create our reality.
Through the power of our imagination.
It was definitely something to think about.
It is, for sure.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
See you then.